From the twisted realm of science and the darkest pits of reason comes chilling tales of godlessness. Bear witness to the unfathomable terror that is the Good Atheist.
I've been trying to get up early lately because I had this big thing as to whether or not I was unhealthy or just lazy, and I came to the conclusion that it's probably lazy. So I've been trying to wake up earlier saying, hey, I can get outside and enjoy the weather, but no, I'm just getting up and working, and then later it gets crappy. So there's no winning.
No, there's no winning. You know, I almost wish, because we have an office that's in a garage, and every once in a while I'm always tempted to say, I wonder what it would be like to completely open up this entire area, fucking sun everywhere, and then all of a sudden the truth is our neighbors right across from us are these rubbernecking fucking
thieves and drug dealers, and,
Exactly.
and they have a front yard that looks like there's a permanent garage sale out there. And when their kids start crying, they literally kick their kids outside the house into the front yard. I have seen it many times.
I saw one of those kids playing in the middle of the busy street. And our street is really busy. Like, that's one of the things that I hate, because sometimes you can almost even hear it in the radio shows because so many fucking cars go by.
Honking and
I don't
freaking
know,
out.
doing all kinds of fucking shit. It's worse when it rains, too, because you know that characteristic noise you always get from, like, whenever it rains horrible? Anyways, that stuff pisses me off.
You know what? Here's the deal. I'm going to throw it out here, and we don't have to have too much of a conversation about it now, because obviously it's a radio show about atheism, not about our lives. But consider the idea that maybe we should move the office either into one of the rooms with windows and stuff like that. I
was thinking about it.
I don't mind coming in here and sleeping in the dark, quiet tomb, and then we can have our office in a place with windows and light and breeze and you know, everything decent.
We'll figure things out. I mean, I don't know what what the future holds, but I do know that I kind of dig / sometimes don't like this place. It feels weird. Like, the garage is great and everything, except for when it's really sunny outside and you're like, this is balls.
Well, I just feel like I'm missing the summer, and it seems like every time I stick my head outside, it's shitty. But I know, because I go into the office at 9 a.m. and I leave it at 5. You know, when I go in, it's nice, and when I leave, it's not so nice.
I don't know if there's many solutions. Now, talking about solutions, there was recently, there's just news that came out just today, and it's finally some good news, I guess. It's basically, there's this priest by the name of Paul-Henri Lachance in Quebec.
Oh, I like how you added the Quebecois accents.
Paul-Henri. Yeah, well, I mean, that's the advantage, right? I know how to pronounce it perfectly. And Mr. Lachance was sentenced to 18 months in jail today for molesting a girl from 1979 to 1981. He molested her on, I think, 40 separate occasions.
Man.
And he finally got jail time after, like, some 30 years of trying to bring this guy to justice. Finally, now he's going to jail. But, you know, the one thing I just thought when I looked at that was, I'm like, really? 18 months? Honestly? I mean, here's the problem. That's less than that's about half the amount of time that he spent molesting her. He molested her over the course of 3 years, and he doesn't even get 3 years in jail. I don't understand. Like, who decides that 18 months is an appropriate amount of time for molesting a kid? I just usually would think it would be higher, no?
I have no idea, man. And it's hard to tell, because they throw around those, 20-year, 25-year sentences so easily now that everything that's lower seems like nothing. But I'm gonna agree with you and say that 3 years doesn't seem enough. If you're gonna ask me how long, I don't know, because I've never spent any time in prison, and I don't know how long it takes for it to
really affect you.
To just do its job of, well, quote unquote job of punishment / rehabilitation / I don't know question mark.
You know what it is?
Corruption.
Maybe in these cases the only reason they give him 18 months is because if you're a child molester and you go to jail, it's like a fucking giant target in your back. You're not assumed to be able to get out alive. Perhaps. I mean, I don't know. Most of these guys in jail, they have kids. They like molesters about as much as you and I do, except for perhaps some of them have fewer scruples
about destroying lives and killing and harming and.
Well, you'll definitely probably find a couple murderers that have a heart of gold. They're like, you bastard, I'm going to kill you. I have no qualms about that.
I guarantee you that jails are full of minorities that really are not bad people. They were just in bad situations, and they just had to make decisions, and they usually killed a white guy, and that's why they're there.
You know, that's the thing that I guess angers me, because I do know some of the, like, roughly some of the sentences that people get for, stealing, for drug
trafficking.
Yeah, drug trafficking, that kind of stuff. And that was a point of my article. I'm like, if a guy sells me an ounce of weed, he's probably going to go to jail longer than this child molester. And I'm like, he's some fucking hippie selling me pot. But apparently, touching kids, that's all good. It's all good. I'm sure that the 18 months, they were like, well, he's already done so much for the community already from being a priest. Because they always give him these motherfuckers special treatment. They'll look at all the history of the things they've done. And I mean, sometimes some of these guys probably did a few good things, but it doesn't matter. It does not erase your crime. Like, if you think that you donated to charity, but you fucking, I don't know, you organized dog fights, does that eliminate the evil of your deeds? I don't think so. I just find, I don't know, like, particularly with a conservative government in our, like, in power, who likes to sort of boast that they have, like, bigger jail sentence and stuff like that. I'm like, this is a big fail. This is a fucking failure here. 18 months. Boo on you. Boo.
Agreed.
But at least it's some justice. Now, talking about justice, I wrote an article today, and it's really been getting a lot of attention. And it's basically about a little girl called Khyra Ishaq, who died very recently of starvation. And the reason that she was starved was because her mother felt as though she was possessed by a demon. So, according to at least what's come out of the trial so far, I mean, I thought at first it was just merely starvation, well, which is bad enough, but apparently there was more to it. She was, routinely tortured, beaten with a stick, sometimes given ice-cold baths, and then have to sort of, like, stand in front of a fan and that kind of stuff, just because she was... I mean, her neighbors described her as one of those, kind of rambunctious 12-year-olds, like your average, very independently minded girl. Mm-hmm. And you can guess what possessed by a demon probably means, right?
Oh, just way too full of freedoms and enjoying themselves and talking back. And...
Yeah, exactly. And that's the whole thing. I mean, people were saying at the beginning, well, this is not religion doing this. This is just a crazy parent. And it turns out that that's the reason why she died, because the parents were crazy. Mm-hmm. But I'm trying to say, well, listen, they were crazy religious. Yes. I'm like, the whole thing was that the mother had decided that she wanted her kids to wear traditional Muslim uniforms in school, claims that they were being bullied for it, and then basically sequestered all of the children, and there was like 5 in total, in the house. I mean, like, fucking windows boarded up. They weren't even allowed to leave, and so, like, it was pretty crazy. And it's also a big indictment, I guess, on social services in Britain, because this little girl fell through the cracks, man.
Oh, you don't want to know about how many times in Britain you hear that story about social services missing something. There was this big case just a while ago over this baby called Baby P.
Baby P?
Baby P, because you don't want to name them, right?
I guess not.
So anyways, Baby P was killed by her parents, and then there was another case. These same people were responsible for another baby's death, I do believe. It's quite a unbelievable tale.
Ouch. 2 baby deaths?
Well, it wasn't even... There was 2 baby deaths involving the same assholes. And then there was another one in the same kind of district that everybody kind of picked up afterwards, and were like, "Holy shit!"
Was it in Brigham? It seems to be like.
I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you. Like, the Baby P stuff is just shit I used to read about, like, a couple months back when I used to keep on top of my BBC News. But it was a huge thing. So this is not going to help social services at all.
Well, I think the numbers were something along the lines of like 100 kids die every year of neglect in Britain. And those numbers, that's a high number, man. 100 kids. Like, that's horrible.
It's hard to control what parents do with their kids. You give them the power to, homeschool their kids and do all the other stuff like that. And I'm sure there's no, if you're going to homeschool your kid, we have to make sure that you're doing it right, this and that. I'm sure it's just, once you're off the grid, you are fucking gone.
Well, they have that's the whole funny thing too, because after she took her kids out of school, there was a worker who had to go check and see if everything was all right, but apparently it just fell through the crack. Somebody was supposed to, no one ever did, and that's how these fucking tragedies happen. And now, with that, I wanted to actually respond to the question of whether or not this has anything to do with the mother's religion, because the mother was Jamaican descent and recent convert to Islam, and I mean, there are converts, like a person will be like, yeah, okay, I'll convert, and there are converts who are like, everything that the Quran says, I will follow. Like the really hardcore converts. And it actually reminds me of a study that I was reading about mental illness and religiosity, because they were trying to find the correlation between the two.
Trying to find a correlation, or just seeing if there was a correlation?
Seeing what the correlation was, because here there were two results from the study. Number one is that people that had very mild forms of mental disorders did find comfort and structure in religion. However, on the flip side, the people that were very sick, they like that same structure that you would sort of like normally call good gets corrupted, because one of the big problems is it's difficult to distinguish mental illness from extreme religiosity.
Oh, absolutely. If you think that God is telling you things, it's people could just. There's lots of people who are claiming God is talking to them.
You look at the fundamentalist Mormon Church. One of the things that makes them so crazy is that fundamentalist Mormons say that God will personally communicate with you. And back in the 90s, there were these two guys called the Lafferty brothers, and they thought that they heard voices to kill this couple and their child, and they did so. And they were claiming that this was the voice of God and the work of God and so on and so forth. Obviously, these two men were mentally deranged. You can read more about it on that book I was telling you, Under the Banner of Heaven. Remember the one that fighter Keith Jardine was reading?
Yeah.
And, he's a fighter in the UFC. Anyways, I thought it was kind of funny, a person reading that, and I'm like, that's a good book, man. That's a good book.
Yeah, guy getting punched in the head just still likes to fill it with interesting facts.
I'm glad that getting punched in the head doesn't mean that you have no brain. But anyways, that's the whole point. Like the study found that it's just really difficult to make that separation, and that's what's so scary about it. Like, sure, if you have, say, a very mild form of schizophrenia, then you will find usually comfort in religion. In fact, most of the people that have mild forms of schizophrenia throughout history have probably been individuals that were shamans, witches, people of great spiritual power. Just because they have what's called meta-magical thinking. Their brain works a little bit different from you and I. They see order in things that are completely and utterly disordered. They'll see order in fucking pig guts or stones and stuff like that. They'll believe it, quite literally. And interestingly enough, people that have this mild form of schizophrenia in non-religious countries, do you know what type of people they tend to be?
Asylum inmates?
No, actually. They're the conspiracy theorists or people who, believe they've been abducted. These types of individuals, like that's the new generation. Rather than become religious, they're just like, aliens abducted me and that kind of stuff.
Huh.
And they're very typically people who have meta-magical thinking are very isolated, somewhat weird, but still functional in society. They just don't like to interact with other human beings, and they tend to stick to their crazy beliefs. And I'm not going to make any sort of declarations because we don't know enough about the facts right now. But I would be willing to bet some money, at least, that the mother of this little girl was probably one of these people that, had some mild form of mental illness. Like, there's something not fucking, well, mild, at least some degree of mental illness. There's something definitely fucking wrong with what she did. I mean, all of her kids were starving. All right, there's this one of her neighbors had left out some bread for birds, and her kids had stolen the loaf of bread because they were starving. Well, the mother lambasted the neighbor for having given them that bread.
And the neighbor didn't call in, or I guess the neighbor didn't realize why they had stolen the bread?
I don't think she did. I mean, like I said, the windows were boarded up. Nobody knew what was going on in the house. And there's generally, and I think that this is the bad thing that we need to get, to stop doing, is that I don't want to suggest that people should be telling on what's going on. Ratting everybody out. But when behavior is that unusual, you should probably call somebody. Like, at least so that they can go check. People don't normally board up their fucking windows with sheet metal. That's a bit unusual. And, if there were 5 kids in a house that were used to be running around and you never hear a sound out of them, alarm bells should be going off in your head here. 5 kids, they make a lot of noise typically. They're out in a boot. But unfortunately, that wasn't the case. And I just think that it's kind of sad that people really don't necessarily see that correlation. They'll say, well, it was just bad parenting and they happen to be religious. I'm like, well, if they weren't religious, I think that most of that bad parenting would have probably been identified earlier. You know, like weird behavior is when it's religious, kind of gets ignored. It's masked. I mean, how weird is it to eat a fucking cracker and say that this is literal flesh? Or assume that wine gets turned into blood from a priest blessing it. That's fucking weird, man.
Don't forget that a guy's going to come back who's been dead for 2,000 years, and he's going to end the world and lift everybody up to a magical place.
Yeah, he's going to end the world. That sounds like a really swell deal. Can't wait for that.
That's why I've always enjoyed the spaghetti monster, because he's equally ridiculous. You know what I mean? That's the beauty of it. Lots of people only tend to see it from a cup like
the satirical perspective.
Exactly, and I really enjoy the fact that you could really just follow this and it would be no different from any other, because it was founded pretty much the same way. Sure, the intent was different, but the end result is the same. I mean, if you want to look at religions that were built around the idea of scamming people, you got Scientology, so that's pretty close.
You know what? I consider Scientology its own little thing, just specifically because it was set up initially just to make money. I mean, yeah. There is no spirituality in fucking, Scientology. That's funny to even think that there is. But, I mean, I won't deny that there's probably an element of most religions where people start off saying, hey, let's try to answer these deep fundamental questions. And like any fucking institution that is apparently beyond reproach, yeah, they'll get corrupt and crazy. I mean, what else do you expect? They apparently have a direct line to God. Who's supposed to be held accountable when you have that kind of machismo? I can't even imagine one. Now, there's something else I wanted to talk to you about, and I don't know if you've heard about this at all. And we've discussed a few times when people make claims of copyright on YouTube as an attempt to censor other people. You know, those false claims.
I could talk for days and days about that, because I hate copyright. I hate it with a passion. Okay, I think that it's stifling the entire world's advancement.
No, I definitely agree. I wonder how, what the future of copyright will be. But before we just talk about that, one of the things that just came out recently was the Discovery Institute. Do you remember these guys?
Oh, is this that? Yeah. They're the think tank that turns out to have nothing to do with discovering anything except for stuff about God.
Well, yeah, exactly. They're a creationist institute, essentially, that tries to spread the whole intelligent design movement. Like, anytime you hear of a school district trying to include creationism in their books, you can bet the Discovery Institute was, involved. And now what they've started doing is that they started attacking YouTubers who normally put up videos about their interviews and stuff like that in an attempt to debunk these guys, because
obviously, if you listen to them for long enough, they're going to hang themselves with their own words.
Yeah, exactly. And now, like, there was this one guy, and I put up his video, and you know what? Here's the thing that I'm calling out. If you are a lawyer, you want to help this guy, or you want to just bury the Discovery Institute, this is one of the ways that we can do this, because they are making claims now to YouTube, false claims about copyright issues and so on and so forth in an attempt to get people's accounts to be disabled and so on and so forth. Kind of like what happened a few months ago with the James Randi Educational Foundation when they lost, at least temporarily, their YouTube uploading privileges because a bunch of people were making false claims. Like Uri Geller was claiming that, there was copyright infringement just because they were exposing him as being a fucking fraud. And it's the same thing here. They're using the same blunt instrument of saying, well, let's just make these accusations, and YouTube being,
YouTube
gutless.
Just being a gigantic corporation that just sides with the people that might sue them.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of YouTubers are being attacked. Like that's the counterattack from the Discovery Institute now. Their whole thing is we need to silence dissenters, and they've figured out a pretty clever way to do so. They're not the first ones to do it, but we're definitely going to see more of this kind of stuff all the time, and it's just going to get worse.
Well, this is where it's good to have an organization like the Electronic Freedoms Foundation. They help a lot of people who are being basically silenced or censored by people using copyright infringement and intellectual property crap,
Yeah.
So hopefully they'll come to our rescue, the atheists' rescue.
I would say to anyone, if that happens to you and stuff like that, you just need to let everybody that you know. Like, we have to kind of spread that around. Like, we cannot let them get away with that shit. People must be made aware of the tactics, because the Discovery Institute is probably one of the biggest shams like in the world. Like they are scammers. They present themselves as scientific when they are very much the opposite. Like every single one of their board members is a fucking creationist. Let's not kid ourselves. I mean, they'll write articles about, creationism, then deny they've written it before. Like one of the spokesperson, his name is Luskin. Anyways, this clown, this uneducated, bumbling fool that goes around on different, obviously, goes around. He goes on Fox News to tell everybody how, intelligent design people are being prosecuted for their theories and so on and so forth. But anyways, this clown, he's written countless articles about how the Earth is 6,000 years old, and he pretends that he's some kind of scientist. I'm like, you are embarrassing. You embarrass me. You embarrass the planet. You embarrass humanity.
So he's not a scientist.
He is not a scientist. He's just one of those fucking mouthpieces for creationism, and he's been exposed as this many, many times, but it doesn't stop people who don't know anything from thinking that he does know something.
So when he goes on Fox News, is he Dr. What did you call him again?
I believe his name is Andrew Luskin.
Okay, because the first thing you were like, Luskin, and I'm like, ooh, one named supervillain.
I actually don't want to use his first name. He's now known just simply as Luskin.
I like it.
It's catchy. It's evilly catchy.
Quote unquote, Dr. Luskin?
No. Maybe a doctor of fine arts, maybe, or religion or theology, but no, not even. I don't even think he's that educated. Here's a story. Remember we talked a couple weeks ago about a guy by the name of Pastor Wiley Drake? Do you remember this? We had mentioned that he was praying for Obama's death.
Oh yeah. We kind of thought that was a little bit messed up.
Yeah. Well, it turns out he's been on other radio shows defending that, saying that he's been calling on his death again, and he's using what's called, let's see if I can use this word properly, imprecatory prayers. Now, you might not know what imprecatory means. In fact, I didn't either until I had to look for it. There's specific parts of the Bible that are related to curses, basically. He's defending himself by saying, well, look at all the times the Bible has cursed people. And he's like, that's just what I'm doing. I'm using cursed prayers to get what I want. So he feels very justified in his actions. Now, you may think, okay, well, these kinds of curses are probably just something that's in the Old Testament and stuff like that, right? Like the whole Christians will say, like, well, the New Testament, they don't have any curses. Untrue, sir. The New Testament also has curses. And one curse in particular in Corinthians says, if any man love not the Lord Jesus Christ, let him be anathema maranatha. Anathema means excommunicated, and maranatha means come, O Lord. So it's just kind of like one of those, exclamation marks. So if you do not love the Lord, excommunicate him, curse him to hell. Amen. So these are the types of prayers that he's basically using to justify essentially asking God to strike down the President of the United States.
I always enjoy the shows where we're talking about stupid priests and pastors and stuff like that from North America, because I find that, when we talk about the crazy shit going on in Africa or the Middle East, we're like, how can these people be so stupid? And you just got to realize that we have just as many stupid and horrible people here, and they do things like this.
Well, I enjoyed this New York Times article that basically was saying that every time there's a Democratic president, conservatives really start, turning on the hate machine, and the results are sort of like, say, the Oklahoma City bombing, which is sort of like the second worst terrorist act in the United States was committed by an American, and it's something that I don't think a lot of people think about. You're like, oh, terrorist, he's going to wear a fucking
jihad.
Yeah, he's going to be a Muslim.
He's going to wear like a hat, one of those things.
Turbans, yeah, he's going to be a turban-wearing motherfucker, and I'm like, no, dude, you make many homegrown terrorists. I don't know if people watched last show. I linked over to a documentary specifically about some of the hardcore religious right people, just on the issue of abortion, just merely that one issue. And there are lots of crazies, people talking about putting bombs together, destroying abortion clinics. These are acts of terrorism. And Dr. Tilla's murder. I mean, does anyone not think that was an act of domestic terrorism? I mean, the entire reason for that was to essentially effect change in the government using violence. As far as I'm concerned, that's terrorism. And what I find really frightening is that the conservative element of society in the United States is not only not taking any responsibility for basically for what's going on, but they're making things worse. They pour gasoline on the fire on a constant basis. I mean, guys like Glenn Beck. Have you watched Glenn Beck for like more than 30 minutes?
God, no.
No, you don't want to. Okay, if you watch him more than 30 seconds.
Back during, I seem to remember him being the rightest of the right and just a complete whack job.
Yeah, well, like the whole thing about Glenn Beck that scares me the most is that the man will not say anything that's factually correct, but he does the whole appeals to emotion during the entire time, saying, we gotta take this country back from like terrorism and stuff like that.
So he's the right-wing Keith Olbermann, because Olbermann does the same thing, just for the left.
It's true. I guess so. The only difference, of course, is I would say in their delivery as well, because say what you will for Keith Olbermann, I've always found that at least, he'll do some research. He'll try to back it off. Glenn Beck will just say things that he later has to apologize for. Like, for instance, he had accused FEMA of building secret bunkers to be used for some new regime. Yeah, that Obama was apparently building secret prison camps to detain the American population. For what reason? Who knows? It's a conspiracy theory. Of course, Glenn Beck had to... He made this statement on national television with no sources. He later apologized, but I'm like, who the fuck are you? Anybody else that would have made those kinds of accusations on any other news programs, what do you think would have happened to them? You're fired.
You just got to understand that there's a much lower level of accountability. Nobody even understands that the news is supposed to be correct anymore. Everybody just accepts the fact that there's going to be a shitload of spin on everything, if not it just being completely wrong. And again, that just goes to show you why there's absolutely no trust anymore between most people in the media.
Well, the trust is not merited, honestly. I mean, I don't generally trust mainstream media myself. I mean, like I make a habit of any time I read one article, I need many different sources.
I don't even trust the Associated Press or Reuters.
No, I don't trust them at all.
I'm not saying that I'm out there conspiracy theory this and that, but I will never just read what they say and not read a couple of other sources and some other people whose thoughts I respect and that have. And I think this is the whole thing about blogs and why blogs are picking up, because at this point blogs are kind of filters for bullshit.
Yeah, it's true. Well, it's not just only filters, but some of these people, like some of the better blogs, are individuals that are involved, at least to some degree, in what they're talking about. And, apart from the opinionated-only blog, I mean, some of these individuals work hard to try to dig to the truth. I mean, anytime that there's like a crazy trial or something like that, or something that's important, you can bet your ass that lots of people are going to be blogging about it and be like really intense into it. And those are the kinds of things that I find interesting. Sort of like what's the story here apart from just the facts? Because the reason I don't necessarily trust Associated Press or Reuters is because they deal with just raw data. There is no context to the information they provide. They'll just say this and this happened, these are the numbers, and then that's it. But, I mean, without context, what is news? Like, I don't... If you say, well, this country invaded this other country, okay, well, why? Why did that happen?
Take a look at when Russia invaded...
Georgia?
Exactly. And if you weren't paying attention to what was going on underneath, Georgia was trying to separate from Russia. Georgia was trying to overthrow shit and basically take everything back. And Russia had to kind of step in and stop them. So I'm not going to say that Russia was right by any means, but no one ever brought up the fact that Georgia was the one that was shelling people first.
Oh, really? They shot first?
Yes.
Oh, well, see, I didn't know that. The whole Georgia affair to me reminded me of this, that the reason why it didn't get coverage in the media is I think it's just because in terms of the message that you would have heard, if this was the 1990s, the message you would have heard would have been unanimous, saying like a country cannot invade another without merit. Mm-hmm. But now that rule's been broken with Iraq in particular, what leverage do you have? What moral leverage can you say? How can you tell another country do not invade them when you're like currently in a gigantic quagmire? From having invaded another country preemptively for no reason whatsoever. Mm. And it's one of those things that actually worries me. We mentioned this on other shows. I think it is terrible that the United States has lost their moral ground, because now it's like, who is supposed to be that the moral predicate for how other countries are supposed to act. Like, congratulations, you dropped that ball. You dropped the ball. You had it. We gave it to you.
Yeah, even Ronald Reagan didn't fuck it up too bad. You know, he got a little bit dirty and all, but
you know what, I hate to say it, but I mean, he had his principles. Whether or not I agreed with them doesn't matter. And you know, in one sense, you can say this about Ronald Reagan. No one has ever had the kind of voting record that man had. I think there's when he won, when his re-election, I think in 1988, if it was 88, I don't quite remember. There was only one state that didn't vote for him, and that was the state of his running mate. And he barely won that one. I'm like, I don't think any other president is going to fucking be able to handle that shit like that. It's impressive.
When you're going through all that Cold War shit, to a certain degree, I think a lot of people are just looking at, we know he's not crazy enough to push the button for 4 years, so let's give him another 4 years.
I like that. If you didn't press the button for 4, you won't for 8.
Yeah.
That's an interesting kind of like mentality. I don't know how trustworthy it is, because the interesting thing about Reagan, and this was later revealed by, if you're ever interested in this, my book Rogue Nation talks about this in particular, where they say that Ronald Reagan had some really crazy religious views. Like he was convinced that rapture was going to occur, and he believed that it was going to start with a bomb being dropped on Israel. So he's just waiting for that fucking day. But, you know, nobody knows that shit because it just never really happened that way.
I've always been kind of interested in knowing what people, because to a certain degree, when you hear about rapture, I don't worry too much about rapture because, for the most part, Christians just think that they're going to be zapped up into heaven or something like that, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
So, you know, as far as the end of the world goes, if a person's like, I believe in rapture, sure, it makes you worry about the fact that they're not thinking long term, and that's a really big issue. But I don't worry so much about them having their finger on the button because they're not in charge of that. God is. I'm like, okay, that's pretty good then.
Yeah, but you know that goes back to her whole, if Wiley Drake prays to God for Obama to die, then it's in God's hands, so nothing's going to happen. And I'm like, human beings view themselves as the mechanism for God's work, you know, and then that's why crazy people do shit. They're like, well, God wants Jesus to come back. I just have to kind of help push that along. You know, if I help create the prophecies that are in the Bible, then the Bible prophecies will be fulfilled. And that's basically how a lot of people feel. So it doesn't lead them to inaction. Some people, it does lead them to direct action. You know, the main reason why a lot of these conservative people push to maintain Israel as a state is that they believe that this is where the giant stalemate will occur. You know, where fucking Jesus and the devil were going to basically be battling out. So, like, you have to put money into that because that's where Jesus is going to come back.
It's such flawed reasoning on all levels, though. Even if it was true, it still makes no sense. Why would Jesus care?
My head hurts.
Yeah, I know there's certain things in there that justify it, but just on the overall, it's fucking retarded.
It's more than retarded. It's like Sam Harris said. I mean, how can any country develop a foreign policy that makes sense when almost half of their population believes that Jesus is likely or, you know, definitely coming back within their lifetime? I mean, you wonder why is it that people sort of like drive gigantic gas guzzlers or don't care about the environment, that kind of stuff, because they're like, I don't need to care. Jesus come back, everything's going to be all good.
And God put everything here for me to use while that's coming anyways.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, well, in the Bible it says that I have dominion over animals, and oil is made from sort of like, you know, plants and animals. Therefore, oil is mine. And it's just, if God didn't want me to have oil, why would he have put it there? And I just can't even believe that anybody has that kind of ridiculous, like, thinks like that. That's the stupidest line of reasoning I've ever heard in my life. And of course, as soon as you were to tell somebody that's stupid, they're like, don't insult my religious beliefs. How dare you? How dare you? I'm like, I would insult those beliefs even if they weren't religious. If they were just, there are beliefs and they are wrong and they're dumb. It's like, don't cloak them with the word religion and assume that, well, this is outside of the realm of discussion here. It's faith. You can't touch me. I'm like, yes, I can. I can say you are a fucking idiot, sir. Prove me wrong on that issue. I'm like, try to use some of your own brain matter here. Do you think that really makes sense? I mean, honestly, come on now. I know you want it to make sense, because definitely when faced with all the scary news about global warming, about us running out of oil.
Think about us running out of water, running out of space, or running out of clean air, or all the other problems that we are going to have to deal with in the next 100 years. Guaranteed.
I'll be honest with you. The thing that worries me most, though, isn't water. It really is oil. And the reason is, did I ever tell you how much 1 barrel of oil represents in terms of man labor? Like manual labor, I mean? In 1 barrel of oil is essentially the equivalent of one human being working 25,000 hours. That's how much power is in 1 barrel of oil. And we produce like billions or millions a day, hundreds of millions a day. Like, that's a lot of just sheer energy. And what were we doing with it? We're using it to fucking power gigantic, inefficient machines. Like a car. Do you know what the percentage, like the energy efficiency of a car is? It's 1%. After everything that you've included, friction, the weight of the car, 1% efficiency.
Yeah, that's going to be another thing that we're going to look back on in history and just be like, the car was a mistake.
Such a gigantic mistake.
We should have moved past the car like 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, after the whole Model T, we should have gone back to fucking formula on that one. We were like, okay, no, we need to think of a new design. But human ingenuity is now being completely stifled.
Well, it's being put into the wrong directions. We've talked about this, I think, on the radio show before, but just let me go on my little rant here again on just the idea that we know how to fix all these problems. Science can solve everything if we just put our resources into it. But instead, we are putting it towards all sorts of really retarded shit. I'm just talking about the general industry of the world nowadays. To a good degree, we need to simplify and bring it back down to the idea that if we just stick to science, back in the day when everybody was dropping dead, you had gigantic government initiatives on fucking medicine and science. Even during the war, it was being pushed forward because you couldn't be behind on technology against your opponents.
When the Russians were launched Sputnik, every American shit their pants and we need to promote science. And guess what happened a few weeks after? Before then, it was illegal to teach evolution in schools. And after that, it was we need to get every kid to learn evolution. It's just that simple. They were like, we cannot abandon science. We've abandoned science, and the Russians are going to win. Uh-oh. And I'm like, look, you may not be in a Cold War, but the thing that you're fighting is all these looming disasters that are just kind of waiting and piling up. Mm-hmm. And, running out of energy, running out of clean air, running out of clean water,
running out of
food.
Running out of resources, yep. Period. It's the biggest fucking problem we're going to have. We can solve it, but only via science. God will not help us solve this problem.
He's not going to give us more oil. He's not going to fucking, fix the pollution problem. These are man-made issues that are resolved by men.
And we have serious fucking problems because we've already taken the baby steps there. But guess what? Somebody copyrighted the baby steps, and nobody's allowed to fucking touch or use or do anything with them unless they pay the corporation millions of dollars. That just goes into the pockets of stockholders who are already rich.
So I think what you're trying to say here is that we should eat the rich. Is that correct?
I don't know what we got to do. I am not the answer guy. I am the questioner, the doubter, and the angsty person. That's who I am.
To some degree, I am that as well. All right, you know what? Let's wrap up the show. We're going to catch everybody on Tuesday for the bonus podcast. Now, if you are not yet a patron, we ask that you seriously consider it. That's basically how we make our living. We ask for a donation $20 a year, and we don't think that that's unreasonable.
Yeah, last week I think we gave the bonus podcast up for free. Did you put that in the standard podcast feed so that normal people subscribe to iTunes would hear it?
That's correct. So okay, everybody got to listen to the bonus podcast, and got a couple emails thanking me for it. I'm like, you're welcome. And can I have $20 now?
Yep, pretty much.
And and like I said, if you enjoy the show, think about that. There's a whole bunch of shows that are locked behind lock and key. You can get access to them.
Think about how many times you go to the gas station and blow $15 just on bullshit that just is gone.
Man, how much money do you normally spend when you have one of those Domino's attacks? You know what I mean? How much does that end up costing you?
When you got to go to not the cheap pizza place, but the fucking brand name one, and you want to get a stuffed crust pizza, and you want to get the fucking the bread and the extra garlic and mozzarella sticks, you're going to pay $27. Now, honestly, we are not as delicious as that combo.
No, we are not stuffed crust pizza, but stuffed caprese is $7 more expensive.
Exactly. So settle for us.
Yeah, settle for us, and you know what? For an entire you literally get, I think, because of the subscriptions for a year, you get 52 episodes. I'm like, I don't think that's that unreasonable.
Considering the entertainment industry has decided that you will never get a DVD for less than like $10. That's 2 hours of entertainment. So, I mean, I think we win.
We won the entertainment war, so hopefully we can claim the spoils.